The ontological circle, from text to being. Today we're going to be dealing with what's known as hermeneutics, which is the interpretation of text, but this also applies to any language problem where you have a word and you have a context or a syntax that gives meaning to the word. So we're going to start with Meno's paradox. In Plato's dialogues, Socrates encounters a logical trap that threatens to destroy the very possibility of learning. It's known as Meno's paradox. The paradox presents two horns of a dilemma. First, if you lack the knowledge to identify what you're looking for, you cannot possibly search for it. You wouldn't recognize the answer even if it stood right in front of you. Conversely, if you already know what the object of your search is, the act of searching becomes redundant. Resolving this requires us to reconcile how can we know a whole concept while searching for its parts. It's a logical tension that moves from the abstract paradox into the mechanics of language and knowledge. Circle in rhetoric. Ancient rhetoric offers a technical version of this reconciliation, the hermeneutical circle, originally the rule for parsing texts. It suggests you cannot grasp a whole sentence without understanding the individual words, but these words possess no fixed meaning outside the sentence. You interpret the parts through the whole and the whole through the parts. This is the hermeneutical circle, that a sentence is more than just a collection of words, and a word only has meaning in relationship to the other words. So, for instance, if I said I'm going to the bank, that word bank is able to play two roles. It can be the place where I deposit money, or it can be the bank on the side of a river, like a river bank. It's only when I give you more context that word gathers its meaning. And if you've ever learned or tried to learn another language, you'll understand or already know how important this is. Understanding the context makes it a heck of a lot easier to understand what someone's talking about. Now, in the 19th century, there was an expansion upon this problem by thinkers like Schleiermacher and Wilhelm Dietheley. They expanded this mechanical rule from a single sentence to an entire historical era. They argued that analyzing the parts of a document allowed a reader to psychologically reconstruct the author's inner mind, or the spirit of the historical epic. This 19th century model treats interpretation as a tool to extract fixed historical data. The reader acts as an investigator, digging out the truths of the past. This also works in reverse, that understanding something about the historical context helps us to interpret the words and the ideas being discussed. You can look at this with the whole constitutional arguments about gun rights. And if we understand the historical era that's being used when we're talking about gun rights. Now, does it mean that they don't foresee the invention of later guns, or does it mean that they are using guns as a metaphor for human self-defense? Right. So there's still a debate about how we properly interpret this document in its historical context and its historical state. Then in the 20th century, we have Heidegger and Dasein. In the 20th century, this reading strategy evolved into a description of the inescapable architecture of human reality. In 1927, Martin Heidegger published Being in Time, breaking sharply with hundreds of years of philosophical tradition. Since the Enlightenment, the scientific idea relied on the subject-object model, a detached, neutral knower who was studying a separate, independent world. Heidegger argued that this standpoint-free, objective observer is a myth in the human sciences. We cannot isolate ourselves from our environment to achieve pure neutrality. To explain this, he introduced the term Dasein, referring to human existence. Dasein translates literally to being there. It dictates that our existence is always being in the world. The human mind and its environment are coterminous. They cannot be clearly severed into subject and object. We are always part of, or our existence is always part of our interpretation. One of the good examples reliable examples he gives is with a hammer. When you have a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. You don't understand what a nail is until you have a hammer too. That these objects have a relational context that one only has meaning in relation to the other. The force structure. Because we are always already embedded in context, the attempt to step outside reality to objectively measure it is an epistemological impossibility. We never approach a situation as a blank slate. Heidegger calls our starting part the forestructure, the pre-ontological understanding we possess before we encounter anything new. This structure is built from our inherited language, our cultural initiations, and our inevitable prejudice. Formal logic dictates that using your own premise to reach a conclusion is a vicious circle, a logical fallacy to be avoided. Heidegger counters that the hermeneutic circle is a productive ontological necessity. Our prior assumptions are exactly what allow us to recognize meaning in the first place. The city analogy. Consider the example of a city presenting a magnificent view from a specific scenic overlook. A purely objective geographic map of that city, stripped of all human perspective, fails to capture the city as a living place. It reduces the environment to unreadable geometry. The city only presents its panorama because we actively view it from a specific, situated, and subjective position. Subjective perceptions and prejudice are not barriers. They are the exact lenses that place reality before us. The other way that we can use a city analogy is in relation to discussing a city. I don't always know everything about a city before I visit a city. And so I have to know that I'm going to Constantinople. Even if I don't know anything really about Constantinople, I have to have a bit of knowledge about it. And then upon going to Constantinople, I see the streets, I see the landmarks and the sites, and now I have a fuller vision of Constantinople. By knowing the individual parts, I come to understand the whole, but I understood something of the whole before I understood any of those parts. So these things are always in this tension and these relationships with each other. Just knowing where Constantinople is doesn't mean I know anything about Constantinople, but it does mean I know something, which then I can fill in with more data. And so this is that precursor knowledge. You have to have some kind of knowledge in order to have a fuller or more developed sense of knowledge. So in Gadamer, one of his students, we talk about the fusion of horizons. Hans Georg Gadamer applied Heidegger's existential circle to history, art, and language. Gadamer explicitly rejects the 19th century goal of psychological reconstruction. He argues that a modern reader cannot erase their own mindset to achieve temporal identity with an ancient author. We cannot teleport our consciousness to the past. Instead, we must acknowledge temporal distance, the historical gap between the creation of a text and its modern reception. The historical distance presents a productive space where new meaning is generated. When we approach a text, we operate on a fore-conceptual completeness, a term he uses where he says, we assume that the document contains a unified intelligible meaning waiting to be found. Okay, so that's a precondition. We have to assume that there is an intelligible meaning to be found in a document. Because we cannot abandon our historical standpoint, true understanding requires an active negation with the past, not a passive excavation of it. Gadamer calls this process the fusion of horizons. In the fusion, the modern world does not overwrite the ancient text, nor does the text force the reader into absolute submission. Understanding is recognizing the distinct otherness of the text while drawing its claims into the living context of our own world. I think this is also very apparent in something like Shakespearean plays aren't particularly meant to be read, they're meant to be acted. And every actor interprets the play. And so the play isn't fully actualized until it's performed. So you don't know Shakespeare by reading Shakespeare, you know Shakespeare by seeing the play being played. But even seeing it once isn't really necessarily enough. You have to see it interpreted by multiple actors before you understand the character and before you can say one is better or worse. It's through the interpretation that you come to understand the true character and then with that the true nature of the play. And so this is what Gadamer's in a sense arguing about our historical knowledge and about our artistic knowledge is in a way all there is interpretation, but interpretation is precisely what gives us access to the fullness of a work of art or of a historical period. We only come to understand the nature of our own, constitution as we continuously reinterpret it, because if it is eternal, if there is something overwhelmingly true about our timelessly true about our Constitution, then it gives itself to new revelations. It reveals itself layer and layer over time, because that's the nature of truth. Truth is this uncovering of reality, and this is kind of what Heidegger brought us back to, is this idea of truth as something that is uncovered and revealed to us, rather than simply an object that we can fully understand. And even the medievals had the same kind of understanding of truth, that when we talk about a flea, St. Thomas Aquinas will say that you will never know the full essence of a flea. It's too eternal. Because it's a timeless truth, because it's so dense in meaning, you will always be extracting layers and layers of meaning from what a flea is. This dialogue then gives us text to new life and shifts the reader's own worldview through the encounter. Consequently, the hermeneutics circle never reaches its final closure. Every new understanding immediately becomes the structure for the next inquiry. Understanding is the unending event through which human beings construct and expand reality.